So I watched the FNAF movie, and it was amazing. Call me biased, but I loved every second of this movie. However, I can acknowledge that it wasn't perfect. But I'm not going to get into that right now because I already have. I'll stop talking now and show you how I would have written the FNAF movie. Disclaimer, I'm not saying this is better than the actual movie. In fact, I don't think it is. But I still am pretty proud of the final result, so I hope you'll like it too. We open the same way the movie does. A panicked man unscrewing the cover panel of an air vent, the door to his office barricaded by tables and chairs. He crawls into the vent, and after crawling for a few minutes, reaches the end and climbs through, finding himself in a dark, winding hallway. He finds the door to his left, shining a flashing purple light through the cracks. When he takes the door handle, it's locked, and just as he's about to turn back, upon hearing the sound, he turns back to the door, once again trying to push it open. The humming quickly becomes accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps. The man begins to panic as the figure behind him grows closer and closer. He turns around and screams before a metal hook is driven into his leg. He's dragged across the carpet floor, his eyes being blinded by strobing spotlights on the ceiling before being thrown against the wall into a seated position. He looks up and screams to see the figure plunging a giant brown suit onto his head. Blood explodes across the walls, and the man's eyeballs pop out of the eye holes and hang loosely by their cords. The figure continues humming to itself and slowly walks away. We cut to Mike Schmidt, barely able to keep his eyes open, sitting in the office of career counselor and former owner of a local pizzeria chain, Dave Miller. Dave flips through Mike's resume with a skeptical look on his face. "I'm sorry, kid, but I'm a job counselor, not a miracle worker. Just look at your track record. Difficulty to work with, insubordination, and that little stunt you pulled today." We flash back to Mike, standing in the middle of a shopping mall, a security uniform wrapped around his shoulders. He's staring off into space when two other security guards walk in. It's not important what their names are, but let's call them Will and Liam. They're talking about something that piques Mike's interest. I talked to the guy who owns the place. He's still offering jobs there even though it's been closed for like 10 years. I looked into it, but the pay's terrible. Mike asks them what they're talking about, and they fill him in. That old abandoned pizza restaurant with terrible food and creepy robots? Rumor has it it's shut down after a bunch of kids went missing there in the 80s, and the security guard got his head bitten by one of the robots. After this, the two take to mocking Mike. "If things go south for you here, Mike, I could set you up with the guy who owns the place." He writes a phone number on a slip of paper and hands it to Mike, who stuffs it in his pocket. The two continue mocking him. "Aw, shucks, but what would you do with your sister?" Mike's face grows annoyed. He balls up his fists inside the pocket of his blazer. "You could bring her with you, but who knows? She might get herself bit, just like that guard." Mike loses control, tackling Will into the fountain. He quickly jumps atop and begins wrestling him to the ground, nearly drowning him. We cut back to Dave's office, where Mike shuffles nervously in his seat. "But what about that pizza place you own?" He shows Dave the slip of paper. "I heard you're still giving jobs there." Dave stares at the number on the paper and sighs. "Sure, why not? After all, a position there just became available." Mike shifts uncomfortably as Dave stares dreamily into space. The place was huge in the 80s with the kids. I know it's expensive to keep paying for that plot of land, but I just can't bring myself to tear it down. He folds up Mike's resume. "You can start on Monday." Mike thanks him and the two shake hands, and we cut to him walking back into his house, where we're introduced to his little sister, Abby. She asks Mike what his new job is, to which he tells her about how he now has to work the night shift. "The problem is that I have to work nights, so what am I going to do about you?" Due to his less-than-handsome job history and unapproachable attitude, Mike's neighbors didn't like him, and would most likely be unwilling to babysit Abby. She suggests Mike leaving her at the house while he works. "Nope, there's nothing you can say that'll get me to leave you here alone at night." After pondering for a moment, Mike suggests that he take Abby to the pizzeria with him. Abby, though initially reluctant, agrees, and we cut to the two pulling into the lot of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, a building cloaked in darkness aside from the bright green sign above the door. The two enter the building and are met with grimy walls, overturned tables and chairs, and neon signs jolting in and out of life. Mike takes Abby's hand and leads her down the hall to the security office, a small room filled only by a single locker, bench, and a desk covered in balled-up papers and old CCTVs. Mike settles down at the desk before noticing a VHS tape with his name on it, sticking out of an old VCR. He pushes the tape down and the following video plays.
Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. The genius who created Fazbear Entertainment opened Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria to indulge in his two greatest passions, family-friendly fun and cutting-edge animatronic technology. Our characters interact with guests in truly lifelike fashion. Let's introduce you to the stars of the show. Adorable, aren't they?
Mike tries to turn the VCR back on, but stops without much contempt. He sits back in his chair and notices Abby, already in her sleeping bag, facing the wall. He sighs and stares at the CCTVs, all displaying security camera feeds to different rooms of the building. And we cut to him being awoken by the alarm on his watch. He looks at his wrist, 6 a.m. He wakes up Abby and the two leave the office, closing the door behind them. The camera follows them down the hallway before panning toward the giant boarded stage in the dining room. A slight breeze tosses the heavy purple curtains slightly to the side, and we once again cut, this time later in the day as Mike is sitting at the couch when the phone rings. He puts it to his ear. "Hey, Mike. How's your first night?" Dave tells Mike about the electricity in the pizzeria being spotty, and to flip the breaker if anything goes wrong. Mike thanks him for the heads up, telling him that he let him know if there were any problems. "All right, I'll see you on the flip side." Hopefully. Mike mounts the phone back on the wall. Hopefully? Abby walks into the room. Mike greets her good morning and asks her if she's okay with going back to Freddy's again. "I think so. It wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be." Good, because I was not looking forward to getting a new sitter. Cut to the outside of Freddy's. Mike and Abby once again enter the building. In the dining room, Mike stops and looks around. He feels as though there are eyes on him. Abby tugs at his blazer. "What's wrong?" Mike looks from the darkness of the dining room to Abby. "It's nothing." In the office, Mike once again sits at his desk, and Abby settles into her sleeping bag. As Mike's eyes rest on the CCTVs, the camera pans up and back down, showing a passage of time. A bored Mike looks from the screens to the open hallway. He grabs his flashlight and leaves the office. We cut to him standing in the dining room. He approaches the giant stage and takes a fistful of the curtain. Just as he's about to throw it aside, a spotlight from the ceiling bursts to life, illuminating the wall to his left. Mike looks over to see a collage of children's drawings on the wall. He walks up to the collage, and at the very center is a curious drawing. 5 children, in a line, holding the hands of a giant yellow rabbit. The rabbit is drawn with a beaming smile, but the children all have tears streaming from their eyes. After a few minutes, Mike leaves the collage and walks back into the hallway, but as he's walking through the corridor, he notices something strange. Drawings on the wall. Drawings that weren't there before. 5 of them hung not far apart from each other, all depicting the same image. A sobbing child, their shoulders being held by the yellow rabbit. We cut to Mike in the morning, locking up the building with a sleeping Abby's arms wrapped around his shoulders. He looks up at the sign above the door. Gazing into the cartoon bear's eyes, he mutters to himself, "It's gotta be just a rumor, right?" The next night, Mike finds himself asleep at his desk, Abby wrapped in her sleeping bag behind him. His eyes jolt open at the sound of a buzzer coming from outside his office. He turns on the CCTV, which hums to life, showing a camera feed of the front door. A hooded figure looks up directly into the camera to reveal a woman's face. She smiles and points at the locked door. We cut to Mike unlocking the door for the woman. She steps inside and hangs up her coat, revealing a gray police uniform and golden badge. "You must be the new security guard." She smiles at Mike, who nods awkwardly. He asks her if there's anything he can help her with. "Well, I heard that Freddy got himself a new night guard, so I thought I'd stop by. This job's no joke, you know." Mike tells her that she probably has better things to do than check up on an abandoned children's pizzeria. "You're probably right, but I'm pretty attached to this place. I used to work here myself, and I used to come here with my friend Charlie when I was younger. Her dad owned the place along with Mr. Miller." She holds out her hand, stating her name as Vanessa. Mike returns and the two shake hands. "Oh, have you met them yet?" "Met who?" Vanessa smiles and leads Mike into the dining room, where she stops in front of a big red button on the wall next to the stage. She slaps the button, and the dining room immediately bursts to life. Red and blue lights illuminate the walls, and booming orchestral music fills the room. Not a single inch remains dark. The purple curtains shoved to the side to reveal 3 animatronic robots: Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie the Bunny, and Cheek the Chicken. As the animatronics sing and dance, Mike scrunches up his nose, commenting that the animatronics give off a foul stench. Every move they make is accompanied by a slight crunching sound coming from inside their torsos. Vanessa nods somberly. They've been this way ever since those kids went missing. Mike stares at her shocked. "You mean those incidents are real?" Vanessa nods again. "In the 80s, when those 5 kids went missing, the police searched Freddy's top to bottom, every inch of the place, but they never found them, or even any evidence that they died here." Mike was silent, but grew uneasy as Vanessa stood fixated to her spot, staring at the mechanical bear up on the stage. Suddenly, his watch alarm goes off. The light from the sunrise blankets the room. Mike thanks Vanessa for stopping by before making his way through the dining room, but just as he's about to walk through the door, Vanessa calls his name. He turns to see her staring at him with a serious look. "I don't think you should bring your sister back here." Mike stares at her, saying nothing. He leaves the dining room and closes the hallway door behind him. As he's walking down the hall, he stops and looks around. There's a voice in the back of his head. "Save them." We cut to the next night, Mike taking his keys from his coat pocket and carrying Abby's sleeping body out to the car. He buckles her into her seat, and the car pulls out of the driveway. Cut again, this time to Mike once again sitting at his desk with Abby sleeping behind him. He sighs, folding his arms behind his head and staring at the ceiling. He drifts into unconsciousness. Abby's eyes open. She sits up and crawls out of her sleeping bag to see her older brother sleeping at his desk. She smiles and takes Mike's flashlight from his pocket. "I'll be right back." Abby finds herself in the dining room, excitedly throwing the glow of her flashlight every which way. Her focus suddenly rests on a large blue box wrapped in purple ribbons sitting in the corner of the room. When Abby approaches the box, she begins to hear the muffled sound of a jingling music box coming from inside. Upon closer inspection, what looks like paper-thin strings are feeding out from the box's lid and mounted to the ceiling. Abby rests her hand on top of the box, but just as she's about to lift the lid, she leaves the giant box and enters the corridor. Cut to Mike, standing in the center of a clearing in the woods. Surrounded by trees, he turns to see 5 children standing in front of him. He looks around, confused. "Who are you?" The children silently stare at him. At each of their feet, Mike notices a crude drawing in the dirt. A bear, a rabbit, a chicken, a fox, and another bear. Mike takes one step toward the children, and they immediately bound from where they stand, disappearing into the woods. He looks from the escaping children to the sky. The small voice from the previous night echoes inside his head. "Help them." The speakers explode in an orchestrated nursery rhyme. All the electric signs snap on, and the stage curtains shove open. The lights from the arcade cabinets light up the floor, and the animatronics jolt to life. Mike's eyes open, and he dizzily stumbles over to the breaker on the wall. But before he can touch the box, sparks fly from the ceiling, and everything dies. Mike notices that Abby isn't in the office, and runs out into the hallway to find her. Up the very same hallway, Abby is standing inside a small room with a door labeled Parts and Service Closet. In the corner of the room, she finds a collection of animatronic costumes, including a dog, a purple bear, and a white fox with a pink snout and long eyelashes. Suddenly, Abby shivers, a chill running down her spine. The closet becomes filled with a sound of heavy breathing. Abby turns the flashlight to where the sound is coming from, and finds a yellow bear animatronic, slumped against the wall, its head cocked to the side and its mouth hanging loosely on its hinges. Mike storms about the middle of the dining room, cursing himself for being dumb enough to bring Abby here. He grabs the stage curtains and throws them aside, but to his surprise, the stage is empty. The animatronics have disappeared, leaving nothing but the outlines of their feet on the dust-ridden carpet. Before Mike is able to process this, he hears a sound from the hallway to his right. He shuffles into the hallway, meeting a door labeled Chica's Kitchen. He opens the door and freezes. In the middle of the kitchen, looming over him with empty black holes for eyes, was Chica. The animatronic starts rattling violently as its eyes light up a dark red. Mike stumbles away from the open door and turns to see Bonnie rounding into the hallway. Cornered, he backs against the wall as the two animatronics stalk toward him. He quickly ducks into a supply closet, but it isn't long before his hiding spot is breached by the animatronics, who break the door down. Mike begins to lose hope, but something happens that he doesn't expect. The animatronics begin backing away from him. They shrink away nervously. Mike turns around and jumps. Slumped against the wall is an empty animatronic suit. A yellow rabbit. The yellow rabbit from the drawings. Mike looks from the suit to the animatronics, who flee at the sight of it. Cut back to Abby in the closet. She slowly approaches the golden bear when suddenly a bright blue glow emerges from its left eye. Its head swivels erratically, staring at her. As Abby continues advancing, its hanging jaw turns to a friendly smile. Abby remains hesitant as the golden bear begins shifting its waist, trying to climb to its feet. Outside the closet and down the hall, we find Mike, stumbling through the hallway toward the office. When he reaches the door, he pulls his keys from his blazer pocket and begins twirling them around his fingers, trying to find the right one. As he shuffles through the keys, the hairs on his neck stand up, and a chill shoots down his spine. There's something else in the hallway. He looks to see a towering figure, a red fox ridden with tears and gashes with a hook for a right hand. Mike is thrown into a panic, shuffling through his keys as the lights begin to flicker. His focus darts from the fox to his keys as the animatronic stares at him through glowing red eyes. Suddenly, the fox springs from where it stands and begins barreling toward Mike, its metal feet slamming against the ground. Mike lets out a scream of terror as the fox swings its hook toward his face. He throws open the door and ducks inside, dodging the attack. Back in the closet, the bear gets to its feet, standing over Abby in a decrepit manner. When all of a sudden the door to the closet flies open and the golden bear collapses back down against the wall. Mike dashes into the room, grabbing Abby and examining her for any wounds. "Abby, there's something seriously wrong with this place. We're leaving. No amount of money is worth staying here." He takes Abby by the wrist and pulls her out of the closet. She catches one final glimpse of the golden bear before the door is slammed shut, leaving it in darkness. As Mike pulls Abby down the hall, he hears the voice from his dream inside his head. His fault. He stops and looks around before shaking his head and continuing on, pulling Abby, whose eyes still rest on the closet. We cut to inside Vanessa's house, her uniform hung on the door. She's sitting in a reclining chair, her feet on a small ottoman. A loud knock comes from the front door. Vanessa stands up and opens it, revealing a staring Mike with bags under his eyes. She smiles at him awkwardly. "Mike, how nice of you to stop." "It wasn't a dream." Mike cuts her off. Mike paces dizzily around Vanessa's porch, telling her about the previous night. Vanessa tries to console Mike, but he continues pacing back and forth in a panicked and erratic manner. Vanessa brings him inside, where she pours him a cup of coffee. He asks her why she didn't just tell him. She thinks for a moment and dodges the question. "Why did you leave the office anyway?" Mike sighs. "I fell asleep and Abby was gone." From my experience there, at least, it's pretty rare for them to try to get into the office. They mostly just wander around aimlessly. Mike slightly calms down from being so on edge. "Like I told you, you really shouldn't bring her to Freddy's with you, unless you want her to end up dead inside a closet." At these words, Mike's panic spikes. He grabs Vanessa by the shoulder. "You've worked there before. You know that place in and out. Tell me how to stop them." Vanessa stares at Mike for a few seconds before looking to the floor. "I can't. I don't know how." Mike looks skeptical before releasing Vanessa's shoulder. He sets his coffee back on the table and makes his way to the door. "Sorry to have bothered you." He slams the door behind him, leaving a stunned Vanessa in silence. We cut to him sitting at the kitchen table, a telephone and contact list sitting in front of him. He looks as though he's about to fall asleep, but he snaps out of his trance and dials the number. He puts the phone to his ear. "Hey, this is Mike, from work. I need your help." We cut again, this time to Mike sitting at the steering wheel of his car, a disgruntled look on his face. "So can you explain this whole thing to us again?" says a voice from the back seat. The camera pans to reveal Will and Liam, the security guards from the mall. "You actually took the job at that whacked-out pizzeria, and now you're making up stories about the robots being alive?" Mike sighs heavily. "I'm not making up anything. Now shut up before I decide not to pay you for this." "Okay, buddy, let's say the robots are alive. Why not just quit the job?" Mike returns his eyes to the road. "I would like to, but..." He pauses for a moment. "There's something in my head telling me to get rid of them. Some part of me that just can't stand the feeling that they're there." Will and Liam trade glances. "He's gone even crazier." And cut to the three standing outside Vanessa's house. Mike knocks on the door, and Vanessa answers, finding him smiling somewhat abrasively. "You know I can arrest you for this, right?" Mike nods, and Vanessa sighs. "You know what? On one condition." "You're not gonna harm the animatronics?" Dave Miller repeats. Mike, Vanessa, Will, and Liam stand crowded into his office. "I can't say for you, Mike, nor these two strangers, but Vanessa? This is the first time I've seen you in years, and here you are going along with this crazy plan to break into the pizzeria." Vanessa smiles, saying that in her defense she thought he was dead. Dave laughs. "Oh, no. Of course, if I were to die, I'd find a way to come back." Redirecting the topic, Dave tells the group that his name was heavily suspected in the tragic disappearance of the 5 children. Mike stares at Dave as an unsettling feeling begins to set in. But no, the man who took them was a very cruel man, but also a very clever man. Mike and Dave lock eyes. His name was William Afton. Dave tells Mike and Vanessa about this William Afton, who was ambitious, idealistic, and skilled with robotics, but also cold and distant. It was such a shame to hear he committed such an atrocity, and while wearing one of our suits, no less. Mike looks puzzled. "One of your suits?" "Yes, he went about his murders inside our old mascot suits. Who knows whatever happened to those old things after the fact." Dave goes on, telling Mike and Vanessa about the old mascot costumes. "We called them spring-lock suits because they had a built-in animatronic endoskeleton that could be held to the sides of the suit by winding the spring locks. They could be used as both animatronics and costumes, but the design was less than up to code, and the slightest exposure to moisture would cause the spring locks to fail, and once that happened, you were done for. Even the moisture from someone breathing would be enough to trigger them." Dave stares with a grim look on his face. Mike pushes forward. "How do you know that he's the one who took the kids? Or that he did it in the suits?" Dave interrupts him, telling him that if he wants to quit the job, then that's fine. But he firmly tells Mike and Vanessa to stay away from his pizzeria. The 4 step out of Dave's office. Will asks Mike if the plan is all off. "Are you kidding? We meet tomorrow behind the building at 5. We cut to the next day as Mike is rooting through a set of drawers and Abby tugging at his shirt. "But I want to go with you," she says as Mike points her back to the living room. "You can't. Where are the matches?" Abby sighs and walks to the sofa as Mike stuffs a small box of matches into his pocket. "Fine. Just don't hurt the yellow one." Mike tells her he'll keep that in mind and walks out the front door, saying he'll be back in an hour. We cut to Mike, Vanessa, Will, and Liam standing outside Freddy's. Will throws a backpack stuffed with 3 crowbars and a sledgehammer to the ground, and each of them takes a weapon. Mike hoists the garage door above his head, and the 3 enter the building. Cut back to Abby sitting at the foot of the coffee table watching TV. She's drawing as the camera cuts to outside the house. It pans from the pavement on the ground to Abby's window, trembling erratically. She notices the giant shadow outside the window. Thinking it's Mike, she dashes over and throws the curtains aside. We cut again, this time to Will and Liam as they smash the arcade machines and destroy the prize counter. Talking about how much money a vintage arcade cabinet could be worth, they begin trying to push one out to their truck. As the cabinet scrapes across the ground, Mike walks into the dining room, telling them to stop being so loud. We follow him back into the office where he begins rooting through the filing cabinets and CCTV video archives. Will walks inside the kitchen. He stalks around, throwing shelves and racks to the floor in amusement, when he's suddenly stopped by a sound coming from a large refrigerator in the corner. He slowly walks closer, and the sound grows louder. He throws the door open to reveal nothing. He scoffs and turns around to meet Chica standing before him. He quickly backs against the fridge before the animatronic grabs him by his throat and throws him to the ground. He looks up in horror as Chica's cupcake is dropped onto his face and begins ripping and mauling through his skin. He screams and pries at the cupcake as his face is slowly ripped apart. And we cut back to Mike, rooting through a filing cabinet when he happens upon a file marked animatronics. He opens the file to find a small instructional pamphlet detailing the functions of the robots. He smiles at the pamphlet and stands up to leave. Liam walks down the hallway next to the office that Mike is in and finds the parts and service closet. He steps in to find shelves filled with animatronic masks and a collection of empty suits in the corner. He steps closer to the suits, taking one of them by the collar and peeking inside. He stops, frozen. Stuffed inside the suit is the mangled body of an adult man, dressed in a security uniform. Blood is pooled within the suit, and the man's joints are bent and contorted so that he can fit inside. Liam stumbles back, quickly noticing bloody and broken hands and feet sticking out from the other costumes piled against the wall, all dressed in the same uniform. He backs away, sweat rolling down his forehead, when he bumps into something standing behind him. Turning around, he sees Bonnie, staring down at him through glowing red eyes. Liam begins to scream, but Bonnie grabs him by his shirt, lifts him up high above his head, and plunges him headfirst into the one empty suit, a purple bear. Liam's body is crushed by the jagged metal inside the costume, and he almost immediately falls motionless. Bonnie looks down at Liam's twisted body stuck inside the purple suit, and begins to trudge away. We cut back to Abby, looking outside the window with a shocked look on her face. Standing in the middle of the front lawn is the golden bear from the closet. When it sees Abby, the blue light in its eyes sparks to life. Abby leaves the house and meets the animatronic in the lawn. It smiles at her, staggering about and shaking spastically. Abby stares into his blue eye. How do we get there? We cut to a taxi driver asleep in his car. The door opens and the entire car is tilted violently to the side, abruptly waking him up. He looks back to see a smiling Abby and the giant golden bear sitting in the back seats. He sighs and shifts his mirror. Where to? Vanessa opens a white door hidden behind the curtain of the dining room stage. The door leads her into a long, winding hallway. When she turns the corner, she finds a young boy standing in the center of the corridor. Vanessa approaches, concerned for the child, who dashes into an open door to his left. Vanessa calls for him and follows into the open door. She finds a large room, almost completely empty, except for a few shelves stuffed with endoskeleton parts and animatronic masks. Standing in the center of the room was Freddy, a supply cart to his side and a step stool at his feet. Vanessa cautiously moves closer. We cut to Abby and the golden bear standing outside the pizzeria's front doors. Abby looks up at the animatronic, smiles, and takes his hand. The two walk inside. Vanessa climbs onto the step stool at Freddy's feet. The room remains silent as she stares into the animatronic's open mouth. She squints, staring into the black void, when Freddy's eyes and mouth explode with light. Vanessa shields her eyes from the glow as a nursery rhyme seemingly plays from inside Freddy's head. The overhead lights begin flickering on and off, and Freddy shoves his hand around Vanessa's throat. She chokes and gasps as Freddy's eyes grow brighter and the melody louder. Vanessa drives her knee into the animatronic's torso, sending it wavering back. He quickly collapses under his own weight and falls to the ground. His head jolts upward on impact, and something small and white comes from his mouth. Vanessa places her hand over her mouth in horror at the sight of what had emerged from inside the animatronic. She remembers what she'd told Mike. Every inch of Freddy's was searched, but the kids were never found. Limply hanging from Freddy's jaws is the decaying hand of a child. Vanessa backs away from Freddy when a sound comes to her ears. She runs from the open closet and back down the hallway. Cut to Abby and the golden bear standing in the dining room. Abby looks around, puzzled. Where's my brother?" she asks. Just then, Chica emerges from the left hallway, Bonnie from the right. Foxy trudges into the room from behind Abby, and the three animatronics circle around her and the golden bear. She watches them grow closer and closer. She lets go of the golden bear's hand and slowly begins backing away. Just then, Vanessa appears from behind the stage. She stops to see the four animatronics surrounding Abby. Quickly recognizing her as Mike's little sister, she frantically tells Abby to get away from the robots, and slowly moves in closer, taking her by the wrist. The animatronics watch silently. But as Vanessa begins backing away from them, holding Abby by the shoulders, the golden bear lunges, quickly overpowering Vanessa and pulling Abby back into his arms. Foxy, Bonnie, and Chica step in between Vanessa and the golden bear, but something feels off. Rather than trying to kidnap Abby, the animatronics seem as though they're protecting her. They glare at Vanessa, who is unsure what to do. Freddy appears on the stage behind her, the hand having disappeared from his mouth. He quickly joins his fellow animatronics in guarding Abby, who pipes up from behind them. "It's okay. She's a friend." At these words, the animatronics back away from Vanessa, clearing her a path toward Abby. They watch her somewhat abrasively as she smiles in disbelief. They really are children. Mike throws open the dining room door. He's shocked to find Abby and Vanessa surrounded by the five animatronics. "Abby!" he calls. Freddy quickly advances for him. Mike picks up a chair to defend himself, but is quickly intimidated as Freddy moves closer and closer, towering over him. "Wait! Don't hurt him!" Abby cries, grabbing Freddy's hand. "He's my brother." Freddy steps away from Mike, looking at him with a cautious yet accepting expression. He takes Abby and pulls her close. "How'd you get here?" Abby points to the golden bear. Mike and the animatronics stare at each other blankly. He stands up, holding tightly onto Abby's hand. He looks at Vanessa. "Let's go home." Just then, the lights above their heads fizzle out. Mike looks around confused before... Mike, Abby, and Vanessa looked to the front door of the dining room, and it was there, staring at them through striking silver eyes. It was him, the yellow rabbit. Mike pushes Abby behind him, and Vanessa places her hand over her mouth. "It's William Afton." The rabbit finished her sentence in a familiar voice. Mike's mind races. No way. "Hello, Mike. Vanessa? It's showtime." The rabbit grabs his head and lifts. Mike stumbles back in shock, for the man underneath the mask was Dave Miller. "I warned you to stay away from my pizzeria, Mike, knowing that you'd do the exact opposite, and then all I'd have to do was show up and silence you." Afton's voice was almost musical, a childlike wonder shining in his eyes. "And good thing, too. You might have blown my cover if I'd turned a blind eye. But now you're here." He pulls a knife covered in dried blood from behind his back and wipes it clean with his fingers. "But now you're here. So let's find a suit that's right for your sister." He raises the knife toward the animatronics. Steam rises from their mouths as their eyes turn a dark red. "What did you do to them?" Abby cries. "They know what'll happen if they disobey." Afton laughs. "Kill the girl." Mike shoves Abby out of the way, shouting for her to run and hide. Abby disappears into the arcade wing, but the animatronics follow closely after. Vanessa tries to block them from entering the arcade room, but Afton springs from his spot in the doorway and grabs her by the throat. "Let's put your confusion to rest, Vanessa, my dear." He drives his knife into her stomach. She collapses to the ground, and the animatronics continue into the arcade. We cut to Abby, hiding behind an arcade cabinet in the corner of the giant arcade wing. She edges her head out into the opening and sees Foxy. She quickly ducks back behind the cabinet and crawls away. Foxy slowly stalks toward her hiding place, his metal feet shaking the ground with every step he takes. Abby exposes herself from behind the cabinet, and Foxy drives his hook through the screen. Abby narrowly dodges the flying shards of glass and continues across the room as Foxy continues ripping through the cabinet. The animatronic turns around as Abby sinks into the ball pit. Covering her mouth with her hands, she listens for Foxy's advancing footsteps. She remains still, hearing his mechanical whirring as he stands over her, gazing into the pit. After a few seconds, he trudges away. Abby lifts her head to the surface and climbs out, staying low to the ground. She advances for the exit, but is blocked by a giant foot. She looks up, to see the golden bear. He smiles at her as the blue light in his eyes sparks to life. Abby sighs with relief and takes the golden bear by the hand. He leads her through the exit door. We cut back to Mike and Afton, standing before one another over Vanessa's motionless body. Mike talks through clenched teeth. "Drop the knife, Afton." "You're hardly in any position to be giving orders, Mike," Afton replies, and he stomps forward. He grabs Mike's throat and throws him to the ground. Before Mike can get up, Afton swings his foot into his chest, sending him flying back with near superhuman strength. As Mike's body rolls across the floor, Afton prances around the dining room like an overactive child. "Oh, how sad. Mike is too weak. I wonder whatever happened to sweet little Abby." He turns around to see the golden bear, staggering decrepitly. "What is it? Did you kill the girl?" The bear says nothing. Mike claws at the ground, tears flooding from his eyes. "Truly a tragedy," William smiles. "Remember, Mike, this is all your fault." The golden bear strikes Afton in the head. The killer stumbles back. As he recovers from the blow, the golden bear directs Mike to the wrecked prize counter. There he finds Abby. Tears burst from his eyes at the sight of her alive. He hugs her and examines her for any wounds. William laughs, pulling the rabbit mask back over his head. The golden bear tries to attack him again, but Afton grabs his arm and slices it off with his knife. The animatronic stumbles back, and Afton plunges the knife into his head. Abby cries out as the golden bear collapses to the ground. William looks from the animatronic to Mike and Abby. Slowly he begins walking toward them. "Stay back!" Mike screams, putting himself between Afton and Abby. "Not a chance. Here I come. No stopping me," Afton laughs. "You never stood a chance, Mike. I won't die here." The yellow rabbit looms over a terrified Abby and desperate Mike. "And even if I do, I always come back!" Afton swings his foot again, this time hitting Mike squarely in the side of the head. He chokes, coughing up blood, and Abby cries, holding his motionless body. Afton jovially turns around to pick up his knife, but he freezes to find himself surrounded by Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and the golden bear. He quickly grows afraid, swinging his knife back and forth like a cornered child. "What are you doing? Get away from me! You rotten, miserable machines! You're just kids! Kids bound to hunks of metal!" His eyes, visible through the suit, are nervous and frantic, when suddenly a drop of water falls on his shoulder. Abby pulls Mike up from the ground and he regains consciousness. He looks to his sister. "Abby, the matches." Afton looks from the animatronics to Mike, who holds a small flame at the tip of a match in his outstretched hand. "What an awful day for rain, am I right, Afton?" He smiles. William begins to scream as the moisture of the droplets cause the spring locks in his suit to fail. Jagged metal is driven into his body from all angles as he screams in pure agony. He struggles in a pool of his own blood, grabbing and prying at the helmet that's locked itself to his head. His screams turn to violent gagging as his vocal cords are severed. Mike drops the match. It meets the carpet, immediately causing a fire that quickly consumes the dining room. The animatronics crowd around Afton's trembling body. They lift him from the ground. Mike rises and grabs Vanessa, hoisting her over his shoulder while dodging the flames. The animatronics drag Afton across the floor, leaving a trail of blood behind them, and tears roll down Abby's face. Mike pulls her into his embrace as he guides her toward the front door. "It's okay. It's gonna be okay." The animatronics disappear into the flames, and just as Mike, Abby, and Vanessa cross the threshold, the building collapses to the ground, becoming nothing but a flaming mound of rubble. In the aftermath, we cut to Mike and Abby sitting inside room 1280 of the hospital at the foot of a comatose Vanessa's bed. Vanessa, I don't know if you can hear me, but thank you, Mike sighs. If it weren't for you, we'd both probably be, well, dead inside a closet right now. Abby smiles as Mike reaches into his pocket. He pulls out a rolled-up newspaper. They're chalking it up to an electrical fire, thank goodness, he sighs, handing the paper to Abby. How is it that you're always talking up a storm when we visit here? I can never think of what to say. Abby shrugs. I don't know. I guess I just find the words. Mike chuckles. Find the words? What's that even mean? He and Abby make their way out of the room. Oh, hey, Abby, I found them, he teased. They were right where you said they'd be. We cut to a small search party of police officers, searching through the abandoned heap of debris that was once Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So what do you think happened? One of them said. No idea. That's why we're here in the first place, to search for leads. A building shouldn't just randomly explode into flames like this one did. As they searched through the rubble, they happened upon something strange. A large blue box, wrapped in purple ribbons, singed at the corners, but still fully intact. What the heck is this? An officer said. We zoom into the box as the lid silently rises.